Thank you for the introduction. I'm Monica Hanaway, and I'm talking to you today from Oxford. I would much prefer to be with you in Riga because it's a place I have absolutely loved visiting. I'm going to talk to you today about using psychologically informed coaching skills in mediation. I think you all know what mediation is, I'm sure you do, but you may have conflicting ideas about what coaching is. For some people, coaching, they think of sports coaching, they think of directive coaching, performance coaching. I'm not talking about that kind of coaching. It's about helping the parties in a mediation to look at the possibilities open to them and look at them through their own worldview, their own lens, what's important to them in terms of their values and beliefs. If we can do that, then it's much more likely that any settlement will stick. So in mediation, coaching can take place at any time. Quite often it's in the pre-mediation stage. I mean, I use the Harvard model of mediation, which means that I contact all the parties separately before the mediation, quite often by phone. And that stage is where some people may need quite a lot of coaching to get them to the mediation day itself. There's a lot of nerves, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of fear. I'll talk about that in a little while. In the private caucuses, you have an opportunity to work with the client, with the party, and to coach them, to help them to understand themselves better, what they want and what they need. Sometimes it's even possible to coach between the mediation days at agreed times. And again, I hope to give you an example of that shortly. And even after the mediation, there can be follow-up coaching, but that would be through a different contract. Okay. So my firm belief, and I have to say that I have a background in psychology, psychotherapy, and conflict for me is never about logic and facts. And of course, the experts in logic and facts are lawyers. Conflict is about emotions and perceptions. If that wasn't the case, the parties would sort out their difficulties themselves because it would be very clear what needs to be done and what is right and wrong. Fortunately or unfortunately, human beings are not like that. We are basically emotional creatures. And when we're in a conflict, we have an emotional response. Now, what happens in the brain is that the little amygdala in there, which was primeval really, and actually was about, if you were attacked by, dinosaur or something, it actually stopped you being analytical. It stopped you from trying to think through, what shall I do now? Should I run to the right? Should I run to the left? What shall I do? Because the amygdala hijack actually stops the channel in the brain which leads to logic. So the only thing that actually is active is emotion. And that is really important for the mediator to understand that, because if you're speaking logical language to somebody who is in the middle of an emotional response, they can't hear it, they can't respond to it. All they can do is fight, flight or freeze, none of which are helpful in mediation. So part of what you can do is to help people, coach them to understand what's going on, to give them some time to come out of that frozen state or the fight state that we see when people get quite aggressive, often verbally, and help them back into a place where they calm down and they can actually hear what's going on. We all have our individual response to conflict. It comes maybe from our childhood, but from experiences we've had throughout our lives. So no two people will respond the same to conflict. And what we need to do in a mediation and what we can coach people to do is to understand what it is that they are reacting to. As I say, it's very unlikely that it will be about the facts. It will be about how that experience has made them feel, and therefore how they perceive it, how they put it into their history of experiences. So coaching can allow the party to explore what they really need from a settlement. And that's very important, because I think there's often a rush to try and get people to agree. Now, if they've not had a chance to explore with the mediator, using coaching skills, what their values and beliefs are, their emotional response to the conflict, what they feel about their responsibility towards themselves, the other party, to the situation, to others who may be affected, their coping strategies, as I said, past memories, and they need to be authentic or not. You know, some people will come into mediation and they're passionate that they should be heard, their truth should be heard. For others, they may not want the truth to be heard, and we have to understand that. And that's why it comes back to treating people very much as individuals. I work from an existential approach, which means I'm looking at how the parties are physically, socially, spiritually, psychologically. That all sounds quite deep. You haven't got time in a mediation to look in depth, but I'm thinking about what the person's physical way of being in the room with me is telling me, what language they use about social, how important is it to them that they get on well with other people or not? You know, what is the meaning and purpose and beliefs around the conflict? And how do they see themselves? What do they need to get out of this mediation? So it helps us, if we're using coaching skills and we're taking all those aspects in mind, to co-create a settlement which makes sense to them on all levels, psychological, emotional, practical, and economic. Now, quite often the lawyer in a mediation is much more concerned with the economic. The party may have been coached by the lawyer to look at economic and practical, but actually all those four elements are there in what the person needs to come away from a mediation with something they think is connected to them. It's not about a feeling that quite often comes about in court, that something has been done to them and something has been delivered to them. It's important that they realise they co-created this settlement and therefore they're invested in it. This is a coaching model which explores those areas and is just quite useful to have in your head as a kind of crib sheet. You know, what meaning has this conflict got? You know, is it about their self-esteem? Is it about fairness? Is it about punishing the other person? And you would coach from them what it is that's most meaningful to them. From that, you can look at the opportunities that the conflict has presented. It can allow change. It can allow them to think differently, do differently, and most importantly, move on from the conflict and regain control of their lives. How do the opportunities and possibilities that are present for a settlement fit with their values and beliefs? Because if they don't, then it's unlikely that the settlement will sustain. You would then, as using coaching, help them to evaluate the choices, all the time drawing them back to how they fit with their own value systems, and then get to the point where they take responsibility for the agreement as something they have created. There are advantages and challenges in the model of using coaching. The advantages are that the party really feels listened to because you're taking time. Most of the mediations that I do are day-long mediations. So you've got time to show interest, to develop trust and to be patient. You're giving them time to consider what's really important to them. What are they seeking? Is it revenge, punishment, justice, power? Quite often parties come into a mediation and they have been told, this is what you ought to get, this is what you're entitled to. It may actually not be meaningful for them. An apology may be more meaningful in some circumstances than a financial payout. So they need to feel understood and to feel that they've understood themselves better, and that whatever it is that's important to them is respected, even if it's, you know, the mediator can't make any sense out of it. by understanding what they need, they can be more creative in suggesting areas for agreement. The challenges, I think, particularly for people coming from a legal background, is that it does require time and patience. It means you're allowing the parties not to stick to the points of the conflict because you're exploring more about themselves, what's important to them, what they need out of the settlement. We're not spending a lot of time on the facts of what happened because they can't be changed. Again, you have to, and again, maybe more of a challenge for a lawyer, but also some mediators, to see the parties not as creators of a problem, but as to two people, parties, sides, whatever, with a shared dilemma. And the creative processes of mediation is to allow them to address the dilemma together, to find a way forward that works for both of them. And that requires the ability to form a real, trusting, working alliance with both parties. So again, as I've heard previously from other speakers, you remain neutral. When you're with the person on your own in a caucus, you're totally there for them, but you're there in a neutral stance, and you do exactly the same with the other parties. So just to very quickly give you some examples of how coaching can help in a mediation. This is a mediation which was a one-day mediation. It was a mediation with a learning assistant who happened to be a Muslim woman and a male head teacher, white English head teacher. The learning assistants had been off with stress for some time. Head teacher didn't believe this, felt that the woman was actually very lazy and was looking for a financial payout. And the structure of the day was the phone calls before the mediation day and the mediation day itself. In the pre-mediation phone call with the learning assistant, I could hear that she was very panicky, but we explored her fears. And actually one of her fears was that she would have a full-blown panic attack during the mediation day. As we were speaking, she went into a panic attack, which I could feel was very genuine. She couldn't breathe. She was very scared. And I talked her out of the panic attack. I worked with her breathing and got her into a state where she was fine. Her fear was, as I say, that she would have a panic attack and show herself up in the mediation. I encouraged her that what would happen is that if she did, we would do exactly the same as we'd done on the phone call, and that it was best that the head teacher had an opportunity to see her in her authentic self and to see the impact that the dispute was having on her. Once the teacher did see that in the mediation day, which she did go to, she did have a panic attack, and it was what changed the mediation round, because the head teacher saw that the woman's distress was very real, and then at that point changed to wanting to help her rather than actually wanting her out, wanting to sack her. Another example is in the caucus stage, where you've got the chance to speak to people individually. This was a mediation, a 2-day mediation, 5 parties, business mediation, one party wanting to take the others to court and wanting to close the partnership. That party was very vocal and really didn't want to engage in mediation from the beginning. During one of the private sessions with that party, he got out a photograph of his child and showed it to me, and began telling me that he was in a custody battle with his wife over the child. And then it became clear to him and to me that actually what was going on was a power play that was nothing to do with the conflict. He felt very disempowered, angry, and he was taking that out on his colleagues at work, wanting to show his power. He had greater economic power than them, so taking it to court was proving he was better than them. And once there was an understanding of what was going on, which was nothing about the conflict, then he changed his stance. Finally, an example of coaching in a 3-day workplace mediation. This was a case in a university where there had been a restructure, and Rebecca, with no management experience at all, was promoted to a manager, whereas Carol, who had been a manager, had chosen not to apply for management post in the restructure. Rebecca, in her management style, was extremely old school. She was very bossy. She micromanaged. She said to people, if they asked anything, you do it because I'm the boss. I don't have to tell you anything. And so mediation was called for because there was a large number of grievances against Rebecca, Carol being the main person. I'll skip that because it's pretty much the same. What came out in the first day through the caucuses was that Rebecca had been very happy in her previous post. In her current post, she'd not settled, she didn't make it her own. She was looking to work to fulfill a sense of low self-esteem, which was caused mainly through her relationships with her husband, who is a very successful businessman. She believed that people judged her because she hadn't had a management post before, and she felt that she wanted to prove things to people. She didn't believe that the other party had not applied for the post. Carol, on the other hand, very much enjoyed being at work, made it her own place and had lots of photographs around. She didn't want to apply for promotion because actually her partner was extremely ill and she wanted to spend more time with them. She wanted to help Rebecca, offer her experience to her, but realised that that was actually making things worse. She'd taken a grievance because she wanted Carol disciplined for not obeying I am the boss, not doing what she did. She wanted respect and submission. Carol wanted Rebecca disciplined because she was bullying and wanted us to stop, and she also wanted to share knowledge with Rebecca. This all came out in the first day, and during that day, at one point, Rebecca got quite emotional because she talked about how she didn't feel respected by anybody and how she needed to bring others into line in order to gain respect. Through coaching in the caucus, we were able to look at whether that was really the case and what it felt like to feel de-skilled. It also turned out she'd had no induction for her post. So the next day was a coaching day for both parties. It was divided into 2 parts, morning and afternoon. And with Rebecca, it helped her to consider all these points which are on the screen here for her. And out of that, she recognised that really the team were trying to help her, and that trying to put them down, put them in their place, she was losing out. So the outcomes were that the 2 parties decided to work together to improve the university. They went to the Human Resources Department to talk about the need for proper induction. They identified that the enemy was not each other, it was poor admin and lack of training. And so they no longer saw each other as threats, but as actually colleagues who could work together to make things better. There was an acceptance that they were both coming from different places and wanting different things, so they were not therefore in competition with one another. And Rebecca therefore felt she could start to build relationships with her team. They formed a working group with some others in the team to improve processes in the university, set up regular meetings over coffee and cakes to move away from Rebecca's kind of authoritarian stance which had been established. And they all put a group complaint in about the restructuring and the process of promotions. Rebecca also identified in the coaching day the leadership training and skills that she needed, and part of the agreement was that the company paid for 6 sessions with a leadership coach, and she then went on to a leadership program. All of these different aspects of coaching are the same skills, really. The main one is listen, which always sounds ridiculous and simple, but it's actually very difficult indeed. You've got to listen with patience. Remember that they need the agreement, not you, so it's not for you to push. You have to make sure they know that you're hearing, and you do that by giving feedback, paraphrasing, summarising. You don't censor the content. Everything that they tell you will be related. Part of your job and part of the coaching skills are to find the themes in what they're telling you. In order to do that, you have to bracket your own assumptions, agendas and needs. So, you know, one need is, I want a successful mediation here. You might have assumptions about who's in the right, who's in the wrong. All of those you have to bracket, put them aside, try to forget them, and stay very much with what you're being told by the parties. Enable the parties to explore. So quite often people come in very simplistic, this is what I want, this is what I've wanted for however long it's taken to get to mediation, this is what I want. And they've never asked, is that really what you want? Or why is that what you want? Is there anything else you want? And finally, through that process, you're helping the client clarify what they need rather than what they want in an agreement. And that will allow the agreement to stand much more chance of being a solid agreement that will work. And any questions from anybody? Otherwise, that's the end of the presentation, and I can go into any part of it that you would like.
Thank you, Monica. That was a really great presentation, and it was like an eye-opening for us. And now we are motivated to read your books and to understand how to use coaching in mediation. Because, well, we thought before that mediation is just about some techniques, but now we can see that we can be more creative, more broad-looking, and integrate these coaching techniques also in the process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes. Are you working on a new book, by the way?
I've just finished one on existentialism in the pandemic, looking at the key existential themes and how people have experienced them.
You're wonderful. Yes. Well, I have a copy of your new book in my house, and then right after the conference, I will be reading that. Yes.
Well, can I wish you all, you know, the best with today. I have to leave because I've got clients, unfortunately. But what I heard was really fascinating. I'm sure the rest of the day will be wonderful.
Thank you so much, Monica, and have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.